is like in a Stephen King horror movie. This should never have happened.
Imagine reaching the age of 95, a lifetime behind you, decades of experiences, memories, hardships, and triumphs. You would think at that age life has settled into peace, into routine, into reflection. Yet here we are, confronted with a case that shocks the very core of what we believe about age, safety, and human behavior. A 95-year-old woman, Galina Smirnova, accused of murdering her 89-year-old roommate, Nina Kravtsov, inside a nursing home in Brooklyn. This is not a typical crime story. This is something that forces us to stop and think, not just about the crime itself, but about what it says about people, about institutions, about society, and about the systems we trust to protect the most vulnerable among us. Nina Kravtsov was no ordinary woman. She was a Holocaust survivor. Think about that for a moment. She had endured horrors that most of us cannot even imagine. She had survived one of the darkest chapters in human history, rebuilt her life, raised a family, lived long enough to become a great-grandmother. Her story should have been one of resilience, of triumph over cruelty, of reaching old age with dignity and the love of family around her. And yet, after everything she had been through, her life ended not with peace, but with violence, and in a place that was supposed to be safe. Her family described the scene as something out of a Stephen King horror story. Those are not words chosen lightly. They reflect the shock, the disbelief, the utter devastation of losing a loved one in such a way. Imagine receiving that call. Imagine being told that your grandmother, your mother, your great-grandmother, who survived the Holocaust, was beaten to death in her nursing home bed by her roommate. It's the kind of call that breaks you in ways you didn't think possible. Now, let's talk about the accused, Galina Smirnova, 95 years old. When you first hear that, it almost doesn't compute. 95. How can someone of that age even commit such an act? And yet, according to prosecutors, that's exactly what happened. The weapon? Not a knife, not a gun, but a leg rest from her wheelchair. That detail alone is haunting. A tool designed to support mobility transformed into a weapon that ended a life. Prosecutors say the attack happened between 9 and 10 at night while Nina was asleep. A staff member reportedly discovered Galina washing blood off herself and off the room. The weapon had been discarded outside the building, as if someone wanted to distance themselves from it. The medical examiner confirmed blunt force trauma as the cause of death, and Galina was arraigned on a murder charge, held without bail. 95 years old, facing murder charges. Now let's slow down and think about what this means. On one side, we have the victim's family demanding justice. They want accountability, they want answers, and who can blame them? On the other side, we have the accused, an elderly woman with reported dementia. Dementia is not just forgetfulness. It can distort reality. It can cause paranoia, confusion, sudden aggression. It can make someone who was once gentle become unpredictable, even violent. So the legal system faces a dilemma. If Galina truly acted in a dementia-induced state, was she fully aware of what she was doing? Was there intent? Or was this the tragic collision of a medical condition with a vulnerable environment? Yet the details muddy that defense. Throwing away the weapon, washing up, those actions suggest awareness, maybe not complete clarity, but certainly a level of recognition. And so the court has to grapple with a question that doesn't have easy answers. How do you hold a 95-year-old with dementia accountable for murder? And then there's the nursing home. Seagate Nursing Home has not issued a comment, but the silence itself raises questions. Why were two elderly women, one with dementia, placed together unsupervised? Was there enough staff? Were warning signs missed? Could better protocols have prevented this? The family's lawyer has already hinted at a civil suit, alleging negligence by the facility. And honestly, that angle may prove just as significant as the criminal case. Because this tragedy is not just about one person's actions, it's about whether an institution failed in its duty to protect. Think about the role of nursing homes. Families send their loved ones there because they believe it will be safer than leaving them alone. They believe their grandmother, their father, their great-aunt will be cared for, supervised, protected. They entrust strangers with their family members' final years. And when that trust is broken, the consequences are devastating. But let's zoom out. Elderly violence is something we rarely talk about. When we hear about crime, we picture youth, gangs, desperation, greed. But the elderly can commit acts of violence too. Sometimes it's rooted in mental illness, sometimes in dementia, sometimes in long-buried anger that surfaces late in life. The difference is we as a society are not prepared for it. We don't have protocols, we don't have policies that truly account for the possibility of violence among people in their 80s and 90s. And this case exposes that gap in the harshest way possible. There's also the uncomfortable question of punishment. If convicted, what does punishment look like for a 95-year-old? Prison, a psychiatric facility, home confinement, and does punishment at that age even serve the same purpose it would for a younger offender? Usually, punishment is about deterrence, rehabilitation, or protection. Can those apply here? Or is this about something else entirely? Symbolic accountability, closure for the family, a statement that justice applies regardless of age. And yet, if dementia played a role, can justice ever truly feel satisfying? If the accused didn't fully understand what she was doing, then punishing her doesn't erase the pain, it doesn't bring Nina back, and it doesn't answer the fundamental question, how did this happen in the first place? That's why the nursing home's role looms so large. Because if institutional negligence contributed, then the problem is bigger than one person. It's systemic. Now I want you to imagine yourself in the shoes of Nina's family. You visit your grandmother in a nursing home. You bring flowers. Maybe you sit and hold her hand, listen to her stories, or maybe you just sit quietly because being there is enough. You leave thinking she's safe, she's cared for. And then the next call you get is that she's gone, taken not by age, not by illness, but by violence and by the very person sharing her room. That is trauma layered on top of grief. It's anger, confusion, helplessness, all colliding. And then imagine being in Galina's family. You may have thought your 95-year-old relative was quietly fading in her final years. Maybe you visited and noticed her slipping memory, her confusion. You might have worried, but you never imagined she'd be accused of murder. That shock, that shame, that disbelief, they carry their own weight. This case pulls us into uncomfortable territory. It makes us ask questions about age, responsibility, care, safety, and justice. It forces us to confront the fragility of systems we depend on, and it reminds us that tragedy does not discriminate by age. As this case unfolds, the courtroom will focus on evidence, on legal arguments, on medical testimony. But outside the courtroom, the rest of us are left to wrestle with deeper questions. What should justice look like for the elderly? How do we balance compassion for dementia patients with accountability for violent acts? How do we ensure nursing homes don't just warehouse the elderly, but actively protect them? And how do we honor the life of a woman who endured history's darkest hours only to be taken from us in such a senseless way? 1 hour might not be enough to answer these questions, but it is enough to reflect, to remember Nina Kravtsov not just as a victim, but as a survivor, as a woman whose life mattered, to think critically about the systems around us and to hold on to the uncomfortable truth that safety is never guaranteed, not even in the places we trust the most. So as we continue to follow this case, let's keep 2 things in mind: justice for Nina's family and accountability for a system that allowed this to happen. Because if we don't demand both, then we risk allowing history to repeat itself in quiet hallways behind nursing home doors where the most vulnerable should be safest.
Can anybody out there hear me?